There occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea.
Hi, and welcome to Dark Oddity. I'm here with Chris.
Hey.
And we're going to do a little talk about Atlantis. Ooh, lost ancient civilization. Did it exist? Is it fact? Is it fiction? I mean, there's a lot to it. So let's unpack. So what we know about Atlantis comes from Plato. He described it in his two books, the Timaeus and the Critias, where he actually describes some of the characteristics of it, where it is, and when it existed. He put a specific date on when it was destroyed. All this information from Plato comes from an ancestor of his, Solon. Solon was a lawmaker, lived about roughly around 200 years before Plato, one of his great-great-great-uncles, and it was passed down from Solon, who actually visited Egypt, and he visited a place called the Temple of Neith in Sais. The temple itself is gone, long gone, forgotten, and no longer exist. But while he was there, and it's written in his writings, that the high priestess told him the hieroglyphics on the wall. He translated them for Solon, and he talked about an ancient civilization, how it was flooded, destroyed with an earthquake. One day, one night, it was gone, and it was an advanced civilization. And the story gets told down through the generations up until it reaches Plato, and then he talks about it. A lot of scholars say it was one of his fictional works, or he was using it to base the story of the civilization. They got too cocky and they were destroyed, to put in reference to what was going on in the government of his time, which in later writings, Plato specifically says that it was the truth passed down, that he wasn't making any of it up, and what he was telling was actually what was passed down to him. And it's pretty important because he puts a date on it. And he puts roughly an 11,000 year date. Now, from Solon, it goes from. So you add the Solon and the Plato time frame. So Plato was in the 4th century BC. And you add that all up with our time frame, it's about 11,600 years ago, roughly. Close to 12,000, somewhere in that time frame. And it just so happens that the world was going through catastrophes at the time, with the Younger Dryas event. Now that's highly debated amongst geologists and scientists, but there was an actual period around 12,000 years ago where the Earth went from freezing to a very rapid warming in about a 1,200 year period. And they call that the Younger Dryas period. And they believe that something kick-started that period. So as we're coming out of the Ice Age now, where we are, we're filming this in Staten Island, by the way. I don't know if everybody knows that, but would be under 2 miles of an ice rock right now.
Right.
2 miles under ice. Can't even fathom that as we live in today's world. Unbelievable. It's something your mind can't wrap around.
Right.
Well, there was civilization. Mankind was alive. So we were living somewhere. Now, basically, the 2 ice flows that covered our section of the United States pretty much stopped at a certain area. Okay, it was a little warmer down south, so there was no ice. Same thing with parts of Europe. The ice came, didn't overlap over certain parts, so humans survived. I'm sure it was rough, but they survived. So as the Younger Dryas period begins around roughly 12,000 years ago, or a little earlier than that, we see rapid warming, rapid sea levels coming up. And some people have speculated that that was caused by a comet or asteroid strike into the actual ice, which caused the ice to rapidly melt. Now, what we do know about ice is that the ice reflects the light back off.
Right.
And it gets colder and more ice grows. That's pretty much the way it goes. So if you remove a large section of that ice, temperatures would warm up. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I am no scientist. Woo! I am Joe Rice. I hunt ghosts and I laugh. That's basically it. So, that being said, but it does make sense that if you take away a majority of the ice through an asteroid strike or something like that, basically, that would kickstart the warming. And then account for some of the water rising.
Right. Now that also could technically coincide with the whole concept of Noah. I mean,
Yes.
Noah and the Great Flood.
Absolutely.
It would be a similar situation, whereas the water rose and civilization disappeared.
Yep.
But then going back to what you said about the fact, it was discussed that Atlantis was so advanced.
Mm-hmm.
We've been finding so much stuff over the past several decades.
Yeah.
That make absolutely no sense when it comes to technology during that time from what we know.
Yeah. We were dating our oldest sites in the world, roughly 5, maybe a couple 6,000 years ago. We're into the 10 to 12,000 range now.
Right.
Called Blackgate Tepe, Karaharan Tepe, both places in Turkey, Gadan Padan in Asia.
Yep.
I'm not exactly sure the location because it slips my mind right now. They're actually saying it's possible that could be 20,000 years old.
Yeah. There are certain cases, especially with some of the strange sizes of skeletons that we've found too. You go into the concept that there may have been giants, and I don't mean giants as in you see in the cartoons where they're like 40 feet tall, but there's a good possibility that we have encountered creatures that could have been human, or a version of humans that
a different
could have been 10 to 12 feet tall. And you go through the different mythologies and the different histories of the different cultures, and they all talk about this. They all talk about these
Well,
giants.
that's the funny thing, because almost every culture has stories or legends or myths about giants and floods.
Yeah.
They all talk about floods. Every one of them, from the Sumerians to the Greeks to everybody on this planet, has a flood and giant myth in their culture.
And not even just that, but they're all based around the same time.
Yeah. No, flood fits perfectly.
Right.
Perfectly with the Younger Dryas event. So if we did suffer an asteroid impact or even a comet impact, comets are known to break up. We saw it happen with the one that hit Jupiter back in the 90s and ripped to pieces, and then kept hitting and creating explosions bigger than the Earth itself, which was, put you in your place a little bit with the universe.
It does put you in your place.
You feel small because if any of those fragments came near us,
we'd be gone.
Done. See ya. Game over. So we have this time frame. Back then, also, do you know we in our in our circle around the sun, we go into meteor belts. Yes. So twice a year we go through the same one.
Yep.
And they believe that fragments were disturbed, and we came around one time and we got bombarded about 12,000 years ago.
I mean, we got bombarded from an asteroid or a meteor with the dinosaurs.
Oh, that was a big one.
Why?
That was a very big one.
A couple of years ago, there was a strike in Russia, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Well, it was either Russia or the Ukraine.
No, I think it was Russia, yeah.
These things happen. The fact that they don't happen very often is I would say, the anomaly.
It's a misconception, though, because we just happen to be lucky in this little time frame that we live in between the ice ages and between the meteor strikes, because we have evidence just 10, 12,000, 15, 20, 30,000. Meteor crater. It's what, 35,000, 40,000 years old.
Right.
It's in our backyard. I mean, not, continental United States backyard, but
Right.
It's not that long ago
No.
geologically, and the fact that all this happened at that one time just signifies that there might have been so much that we don't know about us as a human species. I mean, granted, we're finding Göbekli Tepe, and it's dated 12,000 years. 12. That blows away almost twice the age of anything else we found prior to that. And they only excavated 10%, and they're finding other sites, and they're all these 3-ringed circles, you would say. Have you ever seen a picture of Atlantis?
Yeah.
This rendition?
Yeah.
Now, in describing it, Plato goes into the detail of how Solon was described how Atlantis was. It was 3 rings of water surrounding 2 rings of land.
Right.
Or vice versa. I forget which one it was. And if you think about it, Göbekli Tepe, all these little, I'm going to say temple sites, but they're all ringed. Mm-hmm. In the description that Atlantis was ringed.
Right.
So my theory is that Atlantis might have been a real place. Maybe no flying ships, no laser beams. It's not the reason the ships go missing in the Bermuda Triangle. But it was a civilization that was maybe the pinnacle of its time. Because, at every time frame, you have people setting roots. I mean, the Göbekli Tepe blew our minds because we consider people of that time, 12,000 years ago, to be hunter-gatherers. Chris in a thong, gathering nuts and berries and trying to catch a rabbit. That's basically it. That's what science deems the people of 12,000 years ago. Cave dwellers, no agriculture. You cannot create this type of structures, monoliths, 3D carvings with a hunter-gatherer society. You can't. Because while you're hunting and gathering, that's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You're not laying down the roots for a civilization with agriculture or any of that.
No, you're trying to survive.
You don't have the option to go and learn craft because you're trying to survive.
All you're doing is trying to survive, and you're trying to make it to the next
and not
day.
get eaten by the megafauna who happened to disappear roughly the same time, 12,000 years ago. We have megafauna. We have armadillos the size of Volkswagens. We had
turtles
sloths.
the size of Volkswagens.
Sloths the size of giraffes. Can you imagine? Never mind the 5 species of woolly mammoths or mammoths in general. Sorry, woolly is one specific branch. But we had like 5 different types of mammoths. And all this fauna that these animals were incredible giants. And I'm sure we hunted a lot of them. But I don't think we hunted them to extinction. I think that the climate change caused by some type of catastrophic, what's the word I'm looking for? Catastrophic event set all these things in motion, causing the flooding, the seas to rise, the ice to melt, the heat to go up, the animals to disappear, and some of our civilizations that we once had. Now, we're referring to Atlantis specifically. It's supposed to be ruled by Poseidon's 5 twin sons.
Correct.
5 sets of twins.
5, yes.
Not 5 twins. 5 sons with twins each. So, thus, the 10 kingdoms were ruled by the sons of Poseidon. And, the rest is pretty much guesswork on what they actually presided over as far as how. I mean, you have, okay, so if you have Atlantis, but there's 9 other kingdoms. There's one kingdom, which is Atlantis, and you may have 9 other hubs of civilization going on at the same time. Not just, here's, the United States is Atlantis. No, it's one spot and other kingdoms being ruled over by the same family. We're surmising that.
So now, in that sense...
Yeah.
In that sense, if you had Atlantis, and then there were 9 other kingdoms, could we surmise that in Atlantis itself fallen, and maybe those other civilizations moving away from where they were.
Yeah, because if they're flooding, they're flooding, people are escaping because the water's rising.
Right.
But there are known actual crazy floods on the scale of you couldn't understand, like the 2 miles of ice. Some of these, a lot of scientists theorize that the ice was holding back water, melting water as the temperatures were rising. And when these ice dams would break, 3-mile floods, 3-mile high, miles wide. And if you look at parts of Oregon and Washington State, you can see evidence of this today. There's a scientist, Randall Carlson, that does a lot of work on this, and he's up at the site quite often. And you could see the erosion caused by massive flooding, not just, a little flood. This is like massive, miles wide. So when you go to the beach and you go into the water, it's about ankle high or whatever, and you look down, you see the little ripples in the water on the sand. The sand ripples. Mm-hmm. Well, the ripples in Washington State are like 50 feet high, 30, 40 yards long.
Right.
Just magnified from the amount of water to the amount of water that you're looking at the beach. And it was a lot of like crazy erosion that goes on there that just has to be fucking crazy flooding. Yeah. Really.
I just want to go back to the whole concept of the Atlantis in the center and the other 9 kingdoms, and if Atlantis sunk or there was this crazy flood that happened at that time and the civilizations moved away, could we surmise that a lot of these ancient civilizations that we currently have are the remnants of those? I mean, could the Maya and Aztecs have come from Atlantis originally?
It's possible. I bet you the Egyptians did.
I bet you they did. And the craziest part is, at least as of right now, we've gone so much into researching the Maya and all of the information that we've gotten after the creation of a technology called LiDAR.
Yeah.
And how they use this LiDAR, and what we thought was a civilization with tens of thousands of people, we are now realizing with on the massive scale that the temples that we're finding and the cities that we're finding, that it's a good possibility that they were in the hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
A population that could rival some of the states in the United States.
Yeah. Now, picture this. Worldwide flood going on, sea levels are rising very quickly, heat. So, as say if there was some type of event that kick-started this, and it's a massive scale of sea rise and climate change, you may not have time to pack your stuff.
Right.
You may have time to flee for your life and grab the loved ones you have and get the hell out of there. So, any technology that we did have might have been left behind. And that's why you see the branching out, like Göbekli Tepe and the tepes around there, and the Egyptians. You see a kind of a step backwards in technology. Now, like Göbekli Tepe, you look at it, it was an achievement that we just can't fathom how these people did. Can't. Now, as they excavate more of Göbekli Tepe, they're starting to see that the sites that are newer, younger, so 12,000 years old, 8,000 years old, 6,000, there's all these sites there. The younger the sites, the closer to our time, the worse the technology. The less technology used. And they can't really fathom how 12,000 years ago, the furthest time frame, is more technically advanced than the younger sites. Well, it makes sense if you look at it like, okay, civilization moved in a real quick hurry to flee whatever catastrophe was happening at your home. You moved down with your neighbors. But all of a sudden, we have no power. We have no way of getting around. Cars don't work. All of a sudden, picture it today. Mm-hmm. And then you have no phones, no computers, and you have to restart. But you do have some knowledge. But you don't have the availability of technology to help you. But you have the knowledge. So then you branch out with you and your neighbors. You start something here. And then down the line, 50, 60 years, a couple generations, you're not really making the technology made earlier because that information and that knowledge was fresh. Mm-hmm. As you go down through time and you have no metal making ability or no understanding of creating these monoliths and these megaliths and these structures, it gets lost.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the younger areas are less technically technologically are less technologically advanced than the older sites. Also now, speaking of these old sites, okay, we have the Giza Plateau, right? How many pyramids are on the Giza Plateau, by the way?
There are currently 3 Great Pyramids in Giza. However, there's supposed to be 4.
Yes.
Where did the 4th one go?
But I'm going to cut you off there.
Go ahead.
But there's actually 9 pyramids there.
No.
There's little tiny ones. There's 6 little tiny ones.
Right, but of the Great Pyramids, there was originally 4.
Yes.
And the reason why I say originally is obviously there's only 3 pyramids there right now, but on so many different occasions throughout history and in writing, people have spoken about, specifically the captain of a boat, in his writings, discussed how there were 4 pyramids. But there's only 3, so where did it go?
I don't know.
Is this something?
It's not in my pocket.
Is this the aliens? Is the whole concept of Stargate and the pyramids are actually spaceships real? I mean,
well, actually, they were landing sites for spaceships.
They were landing sites. Yes. Correct.
Well, we're going to get into a little bit of that as well because I don't believe they were landing sites like Dr. Daniel Jackson believed, but they definitely weren't tombs or temples. Do you know that there's not one hieroglyph or inscription in any of the Great Pyramids or on the Sphinx? Not one. These people, when they designed tombs, Valley of the Kings is where they buried everybody.
Right?
Not in Giza. Valley of the Kings is where they buried all their royalty. They inscribed every centimeter of every single tube to the point where you were dizzy and nauseated because there was so much writing to decipher and understand. Mm-hmm. But yet, there's not one iota scratched into into one of the Great Pyramids or on the Sphinx. Why?
So now,
maybe they just inherited these sites.
Right. Maybe they just inherited, and these sites were there well before the civilization even got there.
So here's what I'm going to say now. The Sphinx, okay, built, it's limestone. Mm-hmm. Limestone erodes a certain way when it's underwater. Mm-hmm. If you look at the base around that the Sphinx was carved out of, okay, it's a big square. Here's the Sphinx in the middle of it, and it was carved out of this limestone, huge limestone boulder, I guess you would call it. Limestone is, water, creatures dying, solidifying at the bottom. That's how you get limestone over thousands and millions of years. So they took this one huge block and built and carved the Sphinx out of it. So around the Sphinx is this perimeter that they, left there as steps out. Well, all the steps are round now. All the grooves are rounded off or worn out. Now, the Sphinx was buried for thousands of years. Buried under sand. So how does the Sphinx, in an area that gets 1 inch or less of rain a year for the last 7,000 years, how does the Sphinx have water erosion on the level of thousands of years worth of rain? How? How?
The only way that would be possible is if the Sphinx was underwater.
Now, you go back 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, the Sahara didn't exist. It was a lush green area, somewhat of a rainforest in certain areas. You could go back 7,000, 8,000 years, and it's not guesswork. We know that it was a lush, green area. The Sahara didn't exist. And once that change happened and became desert, we have the Egyptians, did they actually, build these things, or did they just move into them? Now, everything that we find, and I've heard other people say this as well, and it's I feel it's 100% true. When we find something, whether it's 12,000 years old or 4,500 years old, like the pyramids, it's always a temple or a tomb. It's never anything else. It's temple or tomb. They've never found a mummy in the pyramids either, right? Never found a mummy. Ever. Never. Okay? Only in one pyramid did they actually find a box, what they call a sarcophagus. But it's probably not that. And if you look at the layout of the pyramids and you look inside them, it's really not something that you have any understanding of the way they're laid out. It's could they have been used to generate like magno-electric power or something like that? You'll see pictures of Egyptians with these big light bulbs. Now, I don't know, but the way voice resonates inside the place, there's something going on in there, and the fact that there's no carvings, no hieroglyphs, no inscriptions, no mummies, it's not I don't think it's a tomb. I don't think so.
It's funny that you bring up how the sound resonates. When you go to any historical or site or religious or ritual site, even Stonehenge, there is a specific sonic resonance.
Yeah. And if you go into some of the Mayan and Aztec places, now this is crazy because you could stand on a spot that they designed to be like a courtyard, and you could stand there and speak like this and have people a quarter mile away hear you loud and clear. From a society that had no knowledge of any of this, but somehow they did. It's really strange.
It is strange.
So there's a lot of stuff we don't know about the ancient, civilizations, and there's a lot that we don't know about Egypt. There's a lot they're not telling us about Egypt. The Sphinx has corridors. Underneath, on top, there's a shaft on top that allows you to go in. The only thing they released on it was a small video of the guy, which I don't like him much, because I don't like people that try to hold back the truth or have this discussion to validate their truth. And that's what this guy did, Zawi Hawass. And I've seen him do it several times. And he did a little short video and said, there's nothing underneath the Sphinx. He walked in, he got into the chamber a little bit, and he said, no, there's nothing down here. But meanwhile, some guys actually got in there illegally. Now they were apprehended, but they got some video, and they got the video out, and they showed two distinct shafts that lead in two different directions. Video's online, you can find it, and there's more than they're telling us. There definitely is. Supposedly, the whole Giza Plateau has underground tunnels. The whole plateau.
Yep.
The whole plateau. But you're not supposed to know that, and you're not supposed to go there. So don't. But, I'm not telling anybody to do that. I'm just saying there's a lot that they're not telling you, because they know and they don't want to disturb the status quo. And that's the whole basis of what goes around the Younger Dryas event. Status quo was everything happened from ice dams breaking and all this, catastrophes.
Catastrophic,
technologically, catastrophic. I'm working on these words. Big words. Catastrophic flooding happened as ice dams broke. One at a time or whatever. And it just doesn't make sense. and it happened over periods of years, I'm not so sure. Not so sure. We're not so sure, but that's a scientifically accepted, explanation. But they don't, really like to be pushed back on. This is what they accepted, this is the way we're going to go, and that's it. And unfortunately, that's not always the best way to exchange ideas and to prove, to go forward on stuff that you might be closed-minded to. It's not, and it's also not profitable. Most of these people make their living teaching about the way things are.
Right.
So when you change the way things are, they can't substantiate what they do for a living anymore, and thus, you can't do that. My ego's too big.
Right. You would think that you would want to further your education, even if you, well, let's say Joe, if you came up with a theory and you were able to you through research and everything you were able to prove it, and then years down the line, someone found that it was actually wrong, and that the correct theory was this other
Something
theory.
else, yeah.
Would you not want to sit there and go over their information and learn it yourself to better understand what you have dedicated your life to?
Yeah.
I can understand someone who wants to dedicate their life to something and they want to be right. But if you're proven wrong, learn from it.
Yeah.
Learn from it. You have to keep moving forward and not going backwards.
Exactly. And, there's just so much to dive into with these ancient civilizations and, just especially the ones we know, the ones we surmise on, or, some of the sites we found, and there's so much to get into with that. But, let's save that for another day.
Yeah.
And
We'll
discussion.
We'll call this the sneak peek of a even greater episode.
Yes.
When we've got all of us together. And we'll all sit
which
down.
hopefully will happen soon, but everybody's got goddamn COVID, so we're the only two right now.
We're the only two.
Stay tuned. Oh, that episode's going to be great. I have a real big announcement to make, and, you're not going to want to miss it. You're not. So, keep an eye out. Hopefully be out in a couple months.
Yeah.
Takes time.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You know that we're on YouTube. We're on lots of podcasting platforms.
You can watch us on Spotify on select episodes now.
Yep.
We're going to have to figure out how to get some of the back episodes in video. But our newest one, the Christmas edition, was released with video. Watch us on Spotify. Watch us on YouTube. Listen to us on 20 different podcasting networks as well. Mm-hmm. So we're out there. Don't forget, buy the merch. Buy the merch. Merch. It tastes better out of this cup. Also, get your witch on, Magic Moon Sisters, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Good night.